Good morning, everyone.
Morning.
We are in the Berachot 42 and somewhat of introduction. The subject we're going to discuss in the first session, it's a Pata Ba'abi Kisanim. We have a long talk about Birkat HaMazon, a blessing after meal, and we explained that that's applied to a regular process of washing hands, doing a motzi, etc. The question is, when we have a situation of Pata Ba'abi Kisanin, which is, it's a different view, what is Pata Ba'abi Kisanin? Rabbeinu Hananel hold that it's like some type of pastry that you combine a few different things and you make it like some type of dessert during the meal. There is another opinion of the Gaonim that like Rav Hai Gaon hold that is type of toasted like dry bread and seasoned or unseasoned, and it's again eaten as a dessert. There are those who say that it's like some type of a delicacy, it's a toasted wheat or something combined with almond and nuts, and serve it as
like sopapilla.
Sopapilla, right? Serve it as so it's not clear what is the real term of that Pata Ba'abi Kisanim, but the point is that, regardless if it's a Greek or Persian, or is the idea that you have something that sometimes either looks like a bread or have some type of pat, some type of bread, but it's not full category of bread. And we discussed the Hilchot Berachot that involved with Berachot. So the question with this type of thing is, there is a concept to learn earlier, yesterday and day before yesterday, the idea of a davar shenikba alav seuda, which means if you set up your mind to eat a meal versus you just take something as a snack. So if you have something as a meal and you sit and eat as a meal, it's a meal. So here is the story. Rav Huna achal tlei sarifte bnei tlata, tlata bekaba velo barech. Rav Huna ate, you can say it's either the small rolls or maybe he likes to, I don't know, but anyway, he ate 13 substantially sized sweetened loaves, 3 loaves per kav of flour, and the point is, he did not recite grace after meal.
That's interesting comment that they have here, that's equivalent to 104
Your Gemarah
eggs.
is different than my what?
It says here that a kav holds 24 eggs, thus each kisnin bread that had the volume of 8 eggs with a total of 104 eggs for the 13 breads.
Maybe he was hungry, maybe it was after a fast day, I don't know.
But a lot of eggs.
Here the issue is not Rav Huna, the issue is the proper blessing, especially the topic is kvi'at seuda, if you make it as a meal.
Right.
So Rav Nachman said to him, Amar le Rav Nachman, Adei kafna. Woo! So usually people don't eat like that. He says, that is hunger, which means he's hungry, right? So usually people don't eat this type of things as a dessert. אלא, כל שאחרים קובעים עליו סעודה, צריך לברך. So something that it's enough, that's the key, that you make it as a meal, so you should make a blessing. רב יהודה והסיק ללברי ברב יהודה בר חביבה, הייתו וכמה הוא פדה בa'abi kisanim. Rav Yehuda was involved, was engaged in his preparation for his son's wedding, and he was in the house of Rav Yehuda bar Chaviva. So they brought bread that it was a dessert. Ki'ata, we said kisanim, we explained that there's several versions of kisanim, but ki'ata, when he came, sham'inu de kamevarche amotzi. We heard that he make a regular bikadu, and we explained many times that's the best situation, right? Amarlu, mai tzitzi de kashamana. Tzitzi, it's like abbreviation of the word hamotzi, right? Dilma, hamotzi lechem min haaretz kama varchitu. You know, imagine you're in the dining room, you see somebody else over there in the kitchen washing hand, and it says tzitzi. So what do you think? You think it's a motzi, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So So he thought that you make a motzi lechem min haaretz. Amar le'in. Yes, that's the story. You make a motzi. דתניא רבי מונה אמר משום רבי יהודה, פת הבאה בקיסנים מברכים עליה מוצי, ואמר שמואל הלכה כרבי מונה. So he holds that bread that come from kisanin, you remember what we said, Rabbi Nuchanan and other Gonim, is some type of pastry, some type of dessert, or how do you call it in Spanish?
Sopapilla.
Sopapilla, all right.
Yep.
You have it also in
puff pastry with sugar and cinnamon.
In Panama, you have it, or they serve it here, or they serve it there?
They serve it there too.
Here
You
too?
can get it here. You can
get
kosher?
it here,
Well, I mean, it's just a pastry. It doesn't have any, so it's
No, I see.
yeah. So it should be usually parv. There's no reason to have any.
I see.
Yep. So
Okay. Okay. אמר לו, אין הלכה כרבי מונה איתמר. So I said to him that it's a mistake. Actually, it's not, halacha is not according to him. אמרי לה, ואמר הוא דאמר משמי דשמואל, לחמניות מערבין מה הם מברכים עליהם המוציא. So we said that for lachmaniot, for a small challah bread, we can make an eruv. Remember we talk about the eruv, that for example when we have eruv chatzerot or eruv tavshilin, so you take two different type of baked food. So one of them he said that you can use lachmaniot, which is in our modern time it's like a small challah roll. So shanehatam dikvasu tayalayu, amalechad lo kvasu tayalayu. No, that's the rule we keep telling you, that it's the whole based if you make it as your meal. If it's this is your meal, then it's your meal. So
so because it's a meal, we should say hamotzi instead of boremine mezunot, even though it's a sweet bread.
yes,
Yeah.
you hear it from me, you get sick of that. I keep telling you
Yep.
that if it's in any debate in your mind, even in the contemporary, and you want to eat 2 slices of pizza, or let's say you want to eat a half a slice of pizza, but you're hungry and you're not sure if you're going to eat 2 or 3 or maybe just a half. Don't take chance, just wash your hands and make a motzi. Right? That's the proper way. Rav Papa Igla Levi Ravuna Bred Rav Natan. Right? And he went to the house, Rav Papa to the house of Rav Natan. בתר דגמר סוידה תורתו לקמי מידי למיכל. So Rav Papa took a food at the very end and he ate and basically didn't recite the blessing. So אמרי לי לא סבר מה גמר אסור מלאכול? Didn't you hold that the minute you finish the סעודה, the meal, you shouldn't continue eating? So he said, silek itmar, which means to remove, which means one need recite the second blessing only when eating after the table was removed before him. So let me share with you, before we continue, a very important Rashi in Tosefta in this matter. And I give you the abbreviation because the Tosefta is very long. Rashi hold that pat is ikar and the Tosefta is tafel, which means if you have primary and you have the secondary, so you don't go by the secondary, you only go by the primary. So if you have the centerpiece, it's the pat, is any type of something that comes from the 5 species of grain. Anything else, lo mevarchim alav. You don't make a blessing over something that comes as secondary. Tosefta disagree. Tosefta basically said that the Mishnah said in page 44, the key is that that not only mevarech al ha'ikar. Tosefta hold that the whole idea of siluk hashulchan, it's even that is only in the time of the Talmudic, it's Rabbi Tam said also it's only apply to a wine. So let me elaborate on that. Give me a second because it's important. You go to a wedding. We are very fortunate to go to a wedding, friends, people, officiate weddings, and imagine. Trace a situation, you walk in the wedding, you're busy talking, you're busy eating, you didn't wash your hands. Then you wash your hands, but it's already the last dish. You sit there, you do a motzi, you ate a little bit, but you're hungry. And guess what? They clean the tables, and now they announce that it's a large, it's not like a buffet or large table, side table, with let's say with kugels or with cakes or fruits or fruit salads. Okay, now here's the problem. The problem is that you wash your hands And what are you supposed to do after washing hand and eat? Do Birkat Hamazon, right? You didn't realize that they have all that table with goodies as a dessert or as another food. But the key point is called here in this language Silek HaShulchan, which means they clean up the tables. So the minute they clean up the table and make it fresh, it's an issue. Why? Because now, if you, for example, if you're in a regular meal and you have mashkin bechamat suda, you have some juice served, orange juice, you don't need to make a blessing over orange juice. Apple, it's not considering bechamat suda, so you have to make a blessing. But what do you do in this situation? You're still hungry, you want to go to the, or for some reason you want to go and eat from the dessert table. So how are you treated? What do you do?
And you've already benched.
You didn't
You haven't
bench
benched yet. Okay.
You just wash your hands, you do a motzi, you ate a little challah roll, and you ate something small, like a little fish or something, very small piece. They clean the tables. You are busy talking with someone. You're hungry. And they have a dessert table with a lot of food. Fruit salad, cakes, whatever it is, right? What do?
Well, I would say the bracha over the
Whatever it is,
whatever
correct.
the
That's
dessert
correct.
is,
Excellent.
and then bench afterwards. Afterwards,
What do you bench afterward?
Birkat Hamazon,
Okay.
because we did hamotzi first.
Okay, excellent. But is a but here.
Uh-huh.
When you serve and when they clean the tables, you didn't realize there's anything there. You think that
Right.
it's over, and you may be even ready to do Birkat Hamazon. Then, remember the story, they announce, they said now announcement, do what? There is a, once I was on a cruise. Several years ago I was a scholar resident, and those cruise, they went to Caribbeans. My mom came, big to do. So, I was a Mishigas. Every few hours, this floor, they have food, and everyone runs 5-7 meals a day, like they never ate before. Oh, go to this floor, you have there. Do you ever notice that when you go on a cruise?
Yeah.
It's unbelievable.
Yeah.
So you're sitting there, and people always say, look, it's very special there, go and eat it. You're already planning to do Birkat Hamazon, they clean already the table. So you have Gemirut Da'at, you have in your mind that it's done, it's over. Birkat Hamazon. Now you go there, you make mezonot. So the halacha is, if you have the kavanah, the intent, that you do Birkat Hamazon, it's called in Hebrew, להתכוון לפתור גם על המחיה וגם ברכת המזון, which means you are thinking in your mind that if you didn't wash for bread, you have to make for that cake על המחיה. But since you planning to do Birkat Hamazon and you think over both, so it's fine. However, if you didn't think that way, then you have to make both. You have to make both על המחיה and Birkat Hamazon.
But you can do Birkat Hamazon after eating the pastries, and then Al HaMechia
It's not
after
so
that.
simple. It's a discussion among the It's not so simple. The best case scenario, just think that Birkat Hamazon will do both, and it should be also for the cake. In other words, when you're about to eat the cake, you make the bracha on the cake and register it in your mind that when you do Birkat Hamazon, it will cover both.
Right, because I mean the Al HaMechia is really just sort of taking the Birkat Hamazon, the three
Abridged.
facets of it, and putting it all together into one bracha. So you're really
Yes.
covering it when you say Birkat Hamazon anyway.
Yes, but go the other way around. Which means, if you didn't know about that cake, you have to do Birkat Hamazon.
Right,
The Al HaMechia will not save you from Birkat Hamazon, but Birkat
Right.
Hamazon can cover Al HaMechia
right,
if you have that intent.
right. I
Okay.
think that's what I was saying. Okay.
Yeah, why we got to wash why we have to say the blessing if we haven't washed we hand a second time to conclude the heating.
The
You
key
know.
point, what we have here in our discussion, is what exactly you registered in your brain before the meal. In other words, you registered to eat.
to eat.
They clean up the table. You didn't know that it's a new surprise of new things. The minute it's called in Hebrew haba mechamat hasuda. It's not something that comes as a part of the meal. It's a surprise. So imagine if you bought a lottery ticket, okay, and Hashem bless you with a $10,000, right? And then all of a sudden they call you up and said, "Oh, we mix you with another ticket." Or you know what? The reality, you have we discovered that it's not 10,000; it's 15,000. So the point is, it's a surprise of blessing. You didn't anticipate to have that food as an addition, and you eat it. So you should be thankful for that. So since they cleaned the table, so you thought that you're going to do blessing after meal, and it's over. Now you have more food. You have to be thankful for that. Rabba ורבי זרע איקלו לבי ריש גלותא. לבתר דסליקו תקא מקמייכו Shadrlu Ristena mi Resh Galuta. We explained that Resh Galuta was the head of the exile, head of the Jewish people, and is the head administrator. And there's a few versions if it was that he was in a different room, but anyway, in simple, they brought a Ristena. Ristena, the base of the Gemarah, later in page 58. It's from the Persian, which is some type of a Persian dest, that meaning a hand. It's a large size of some type of food. Anyway, Rabba Rachel Rabbi Zera lo achel. So Rabbi Eid Rabbi Zera nat. Amar lelasvar mar salek asur melechol. What we just said. At the minute you clean up the table, you shouldn't eat. The people will be more, it's forbidden to eat. Amar le anana taka deresh galuta samchinan. He said, we are dependent upon the table of the head, like the head administrator. It's called Resh Galuta, like the prime minister or the exile head. And so long as it's not completed his meal, his guests have not completed the meal either. Some say that he was in a different room. It's Rashi said, "Ve'en silukenu siluk." It's not considering cleaning the table. You know why? Shedatenu im isam masaot met panav elenu nochal. Isam masaot, it's written about Yosef that he bred them all more food. So the Reish Galuta either is in a different room or is planning to bring more food. So even they clean up now, you know, sometimes it happens, they clean up your table and they serve you, I don't know, nowadays they serve you Japanese, whatever, sushi, tempura, right? And then they clean up the table, now they serve you Chinese, right? Go to Umami, right? So Umami in Baltimore, it's a glad kosher place, they serving Japanese and they're serving Chinese and so every time they invite me there all of a sudden in the middle of the meal they clean up the table, there's something else. So anyway, Amar Rav הרגיל בשמן שמן מעכבו. One who is accustomed to applying fragrant oil on his hand after meal, failure to apply that oil delays at the end of his meal and is not considered to have finished his meal and is not required to recite a blessing before continuing to eat. Right? אמר רב אשי כי אבן ברב כהנא אמר לן כגון על דרגלן במשחה משחה מעכבלן. So Rav Ashi said when we are in the house of Rav Kahana, he said to us, we, for example, who are accustomed to oil, failure to apply that oil delay at the end of the meal for us. Said, nevertheless, the Gemarah concludes that the halacha is not according to all of these statements, and at the end of the meal is not determined by those factors. אלא, כי אחד אמר רבי חייא ברש"י אמר רב, 3 דחיפות הם. Rabbi חייא ברש"י said there are 3 pairs that immediately follow each other. Dchifot, in that sense, the Talmud Yerushalmi, Jerusalem Talmud cite that it's like something that attach, it's follow. So it's one connected to the other. So he said, "Techef lismicha shchita." Immediately following placing hands on the head of the sacrifice in that time that they have a sacrificial offering, right away what did they do? They slaughter. That was an attachment. Techef lig'ula tfilah. Remember, we do Baruch Ata Hashem Ga'al Israel in a soft voice because the immediately following the Geula, the redemption, is the that we say after Shema is right away the Amidah prayer. Techef lintilat yadayim bracha. Right upon the following washing the hands, so we make the grace. Here they talk about grace after meal, which means the Gemarah here referring to the final water, the ritual washing of the hands after the meal, following immediately by the Birkat Hamazon, grace after meal. But in Yerushalmi, Talmud Yerushalmi, Jerusalem Talmud, it appears that it's actually referring to washing hands before the meal. Anyway, just as a side note, it's a story about the Arizal, the great Ari, the 16th century Kabbalistic rabbi. So one of the students come and he says that his back hurting right? I mean the top, the shoulders, Ari looked at him and he saw that he's like very painful. So Ari was a great Kabbalistic rabbi. Who are we to talk about the Ari? He was the greatest. So he told him that he quoted him this Gemarah, and he said, it's written here, Teichef lintilat yadayim bracha, which means you did a hefsek, you did some interruption between washing your hands and eating the bread. And that's the cause. Why? Because the Ari said if you take the letters Techef and Katef in Hebrew, Taf, Kaf, Pei Sofit, which is attachment, Techef, right away, or Katef, Kaf, Taf, Pei Sofit, which is shoulders, you see the same letters. So Ari said to him, you have to do tikkun, you have to repair that, to do teshuvah for that, and then it will heal. And according to the Hasidic teaching, he was healed by that. But that's just as a side note. Anyway, Amar Abaye said a similar note, Af anu nomar, techef letalmidei chachamim bracha. So he said that immediately following the entrance of a Torah scholar into a house, a blessing rests upon the house. שנאמר, ויברכני Hashem בגללך. That Laban, the father-in-law of Yaakov, of Jacob, already said, Hashem, the Lord, bless me because of you, because of Yaakov. Ibaite Mameacha is another interpretation from where they said about Joseph, that everyone was blessed for him. Particularly they said, שנאמר, ויברך Hashem בבית המצרי בגלל יוסף, that the Lord blessed the house of the Egyptian. For what? On the account of Yosef. So Rashi add here that it's not only someone that have a Torah scholar. Rashi add the word hamakrivo elav u'me'archo bebeto. A person should make a business to have a talmid chacham, a Torah scholar, his guest in the house because it's bring a blessing to his heart. Mishnah, ברח על היין שלפני המזון, פטר את היין שלאחר המזון. If one recite the blessing, the wine that is drunk before the meal, so his discharge of his blessing obligation, the wine after the meal. ברח על הפרפרת שלפני המזון, blessing on the פרפרת before the meal, פטר את הפרפרת שלאחר המזון. How do you translate in your book פרפרת? What is it, like peripheral?
Peripheral.
Peripheral.
Right. Yeah, like on the side, yeah.
The side, okay. Thank you. ברח על הפת, if you make a blessing on the bread, פטר את הפרפרת. He discharged the פרפרת. על הפרפרת, לא פטר את הפת. So what's the point? The minute you make ברכת המוציא, right? For the המוציא, for pat, for bread, so then if you bring other things later, so you don't need to make a separate blessing. However, בית שמאי אומרים אף לא מעשה גדרה. But Beit Shammai said he does not even discharge his blessing of obligation over what? Of some type of Maaseh Kderah. Maaseh Kderah, we explained earlier that it's any type of food that involved with some type of grain. Yes, you want to ask something?
Yeah, usually on the Sabbath, we first, like if we're home, we bless the table with the wine first, then we do the amopsi.
Correct.
So when we finish eating and we want to do the blessing again, we got to have a cup of wine again.
Soon we'll discuss that.
Okay.
That wine doing the Suda. In general term, we said it yesterday too, that the minute you have a wine doing the meal, you have to make a separate blessing for that wine. So if you have two separate wines, one for the Kiddush, one doing the meal, you have to make two blessings. But here, back to our subject, Rashi here said, Maaseh Kderah Chilka Targis V'Tiseni. So it's like a split into a halves and the thirds and the quarters or fifth. So it's all the blessing of mezonot. So Beit Shammai said that if it's that case, you have to make a separate bracha. Hayu yoshvim. In those days they used to recline, like in a Passover Seder they recline. But if they see, kol echad mevarech la'atzmo, everyone make his own blessing. Hesevu, if they recline, echad mevarech lekulam. So here we need to read the Tosefta, but we don't have enough time. But there is a concept that it's called shomea keoneh, which means, let's say, soon it's Rosh Hashanah and Hashem. So, Baruch Atah Hashem, you say the blessing of the shofar, Lishmoa kol shofar, to hear the sound of the shofar. So the minute you hear the sound of the shofar, it's like you are part of that, like you respond, you're part of that. The Minchat Chinuch said that hearing the sound of the shofar is the key point, not so much the blowing the shofar or the blessing of the shofar. The key point is to hear the shofar. So here they said Shomea Koneh. So they said, Balaim yain b'toch hamazon, if the wine is brought during the meal, kol echad ve'echad mevarech la'atzmo. Each one recites the blessing for himself. Achar hamazon, if this wine brought after the meal, echad mevarech lekulam. One recite the blessing for all of them. Vehu, and that person, omer ala mugmar, they say the blessing on the incense, which means Rashi explained here, Oto sheberach ala yain, the one that make a blessing over the wine, hu mevarech ala mugmar שהיו רגילים להביא לפניהם אחריו וכילה. They used to bring at the end some type of dessert. They call it here אבקת רוכלין על האש במחטות לריח טוב ומברכים עליו בורא מיני בשמים. They used to bring some type of incense, so they make a special blessing for that fragrance. So there's in some restaurants delicacies they used to do it. All right. So they said, והוא אומר על המוגמר, ואף על פי שהם מביאים את המוגמר לאחר הסעודה. Even they bring at the end of the meal, they still make the blessing. So for example, if it's a Shabbat during the service, you have the guy that walk like you in South Africa, right? It's usually a guy that walk with a tabak, with a snuff box.
Snuff box, yep.
Right? And people take and snuff from that. So what do? They make a bracha for that or not? You know that by the Sephardim, when I go to Sephardic shuls, many times they invite me to the, so they have, no, I can tell you that those Israeli shuls, when I'm teaching over there in Baltimore, they're like, they're kissing my hands, and anyway, they have a some type of besamim. They have like those leaves that they brings you, and for example, if it's a special services or I heard even Friday night services, so they or before the Seuda, like those Sephardi groups that come here, so they bring those incense, those besamim, and they make a bracha boreatze besamim and snap it. Some does it before the Seuda, sometimes doing the Seuda, sometimes doing the service. Right? So here said, even in those days, they do not bring out the incense until after the meal, which means until after the Birkat Hamazon, which means the incense is not regarded as the part of the meal requirement. But since we are recited the blessing the wine after the meal, right, prior to Birkat Hamazon, so Rashi explains that start reciting the end of the meal blessing for the enjoyment שלאחר ברכת המזון שאינו מצרכי הסעודה, אפילו אחרי מי שברך על היין שהתחיל בברכות האחרונות גומרים. So the person who is completes those blessings he make the blessing of the incense, so gomran. So since the Mishnah said that the wine that precedes the meal is basically it's exempt, the wine after the meal. So here's a question. אמר רבא בר חנא אמר רבי יוחנן לא שנו לה בשבתות ימים טובים. הואיל ואדם קובע סעודתו על היין, אבל בשאר ימות השנה מברך על כל כוס וכוס. Here we differentiate between a meal of Shabbat and a meal of doing the regular day, a regular week. So in Shabbat, it's not just a drinking. It's a sacred. It's a special time of holiness. So because one can continue drinking for his leisure, right? So it's one bases his meal on the wine. But the rest of the day of the year, so wine recite the blessing over every cup, right? Because his original intention was not to drink a lot, so it's different. So mevarech al kol kos v'chos, we made a blessing for each and every meal, every cup of wine. Itmana me'amar Rabbi Yoshua ben Levi, lo shanu ela b'shabbatot v'yamim tovim. This applies specifically on Shabbat and special festivals, right? ובשעה שאדם יוצא מבית המרחץ, in those days, person used to go out of the bathhouse, so there's all sweat or whatever it is, so they drink. ובשעת הקזת דם, and also in those days they used to have taking out the blood. It was a special procedure, they used to do it. So again, people wants to eat, people wants to rest. הואיל ואדם קובע סעודתו על היין, so person have the intent to drink a lot, right? So then, since on these occasions one typically base his meal on wine, אבל בשאר ימות השנה מברך על כוס וכוס. However, during the rest of the years, right, the rest of the day of the year, what happened? One who drink wine after at the meal recite the blessing over each and every cup. Rabba bar Mari ikla levei Rabba bachol. So the Gemarah relates that Rabba bar Mari happened to come to the house of Rabba just on a regular day of the week. Chazyei devarech lifnei hamazon. So he noticed that they make a blessing over wine when? Before the meal. Vehadar, and then again, barech lachar hamazon. And now we notice that is the second time he make a blessing, which is after the meal. It's 2 times blessing over the wine. Amar le yishar. It's like he said, yeshar koach. He said, well done. V'chen amar Rabbi Yoshua ben Levi, that it's a proper conduct. Rav Yitzchak bar Yosef ikla levei Abayei biyom tov. There's another story that Rav Yitzchak bar Yosef, so he attended the house of Abayei on the holiday, on the festival. Chazyei, he saw, devarech akal kasa vekasa. He noticed that he made a bracha over each and every cup of wine. Amar le, he said to him, la savar lamar lehad Rabbi Yoshua ben Levi? Right? Do you not follow the halacha of Rabbi Yoshua ben Levi? What? That what did he said? Rabbi Yoshua ben Levi tells us that one blessing is sufficient. So Abayei responded to him and he said, Amar le nimlach ana, which means my thought was that I'm going to do what? That I'm going to do a cup of wine, and then I change my mind and decide that I'm not going to drink, and then I changed my mind and I decided to drink. right? So you now have a new situation, which is you don't have the intent, and now you change your mind. So if you change your mind, you have to recite a blessing each and every cup. Again, in other words, what he holds, that if you have in your mind before the meal that's going to be again reoccur, that you're going to drink more and more, then he holds that making the blessing over the wine once, it's sufficient. But since when he drank the cup at the very beginning, he thought it's going to be just that time, or not to drink, so now each and every cup, you need to make a separate blessing, a ba'alu. So here is, you have a serious predicament, dilemma. It's a situation that, what's the halacha if you have a wine during the meal? Is that exempt the wine after the meal from a blessing? If you tell me that if you make a blessing before the meal, is exempt the blessing after the meal, because this one is for drink and the wine after meal is to drink for its own sake. But here the purpose of the drinking is this, the zelishtot velzelishtot lo or dilma loshna. But if you have the purpose of drinking this, the wine after meal, and if you drink that, the wine after meal is to moisten the food and to facilitate its consumption, so it's no. So the blessing that on one cannot exempt the other. All you said is no difference, and all drinking is considered the same. So just a short halacha when it's come to this. The Magen Avraham and the Taz said in Shulchan Aruch in 174 that nowadays, when it's a customary to continue eating after the grace of meal, the blessing on wine during the meal exempt wine that one drink after the meal. So Rav Amar poter, Rav Kahana Amar eno poter. So one opinion exempt, one not. Rav Nachman Amar poter, Rav Sheshet Amar eno poter. Another machloket, one said yes, one said not exempt. Rav Huna v'Rav Yehuda v'chol tamid l'Rav Amar Amri eno poter. You see big, huge disagreement. So הייתי ורבה לרב נחמן בא להם יין בתוך המזון כל אחד ואחד מברך לעצמו. If you have a wine during the meal, each and every person makes to himself. In other words, it's not like blowing the shofar, that you're hearing one person blow the shofar and you exempt from yourself, shomea keone. But here, since each and every one of them drink, he hold that during the meal, each and every person make his own blessing. Le'achar hamazon. But if it's after the meal, so he said, Echad mevarech lekulam, one recite the blessing on behalf of all. So apparently, even though they recite the blessing over the wine during the course of the meal, they must recite the blessing over the wine after the meal as well. So that's not. So אחרי כמרים, לא בא להם יין בתוך המזון, אלא לאחר המזון אחד מברך לכולם. We said that the Mishnah said as follows: two separate independent cases. One, if wine did not come before them during the meal, but only after the meal, so one they recite the blessing after all of them together, all together. Now, as we said, Magen Avraham said that in those situations, practical halachas, you don't need to repeat again, it's covered. But we can add to that if you don't have that intent, then it's a different story. Let's say you finish the whole meal, it's all over, you didn't planning to drink wine afterward, goodbye. And then 5 minutes later, somebody came to you and said, look, I have this great wine, do you like to taste it? Then even you drank before the meal and during the meal, that's not covered, that one. In other words, if it was a surprise, it wasn't pre-planned, then it's a separate bracha. Berach al apad patar tapaperet al apaperet lo patar tapat. We said in the Mishnah that if one recite the blessing over the bread, is exempt the appetites, but the vice versa, not. Beit Shammai אומרים אפילו מעשה גדרה, and we said on behalf of Beit Shammai that the blessing recited of the appetizers did not exempt even a cooked dish that they eat during the meal. So now they ask a question, Beit Shammai Areisha Pligei or Asilfa Pligei? Did Beit Shammai disagree at the beginning or at the end? Because he can explain in both ways that the Tana of the Mishnah hold that what the Kamar Tana Kama Berach על הפרפרת וכל שכן מעשה גדרה ואת בית שמאי למאמר לא מבעיה פרפרת ולא פטרה לא פת אלא אפילו מעשה גדרה נמה לא פטרה, which means that the Beit Shammai came and said that the only reason that the parper did not exempt the blessing of the bread, but even maaseh gdera, even some type of cook food, it's also not exempt by eating bread. Or dilma seifa pligei, or you said that they disagree with the seifa, the second part, which means the ktane. So now we need to understand beirach ala parperet lo patar et apart. If someone make a bracha over the parperet, it not exempt the bread. Pat lo patar, that even you tell me is not exempting the bread, aval maaseh gdera patar, which means if you have three different type of cakes and cookies, you have a carrot cake and you have a apple cake and you have a chocolate chips cookies, right? So if you make a blessing over one of them, you hold that it's exempt the others, even it's not exempting the bread, but exempt other maaseh gdera, other some type of cooked food. So basically we don't solve that problem. V'atu Beit Shammai lememar ואפילו מעשה גדרה נמה לא פתר. So Beit Shammai came and said that even מעשה גדרה, even this type of cooked food, it's not exempt. So he said teiko. So it means that this problem we didn't solve and we left it open. It's not solved. Because you have to understand what Rashi explained to us here, that the key point is that you sit and eat, and sometimes you eat and you're satisfied and you're satiate and you're happy and you make the blessing, but מעשה גדרה, Rashi said, שהוא לאכול הזון ממש. The big question is if that מעשה גדרה, that type of cooked food, is really to sustain your body or not. In other words, it's a differentiate between something that is, you consider it as little snacks versus something that you eat it as a full meal. So basically, so far we said the dilemma remain unsolved. The Mishnah distinguished between the case that several people were sitting to eat, which is not a joint meal, or hesebu in lo hesebu la. Difference between each and every one sit for his own dinner in a separate blessing for himself, or they gather together. V'raminu, so we ask a question. 10 שהיו הולכים בדרך. So if there are 10 people that walking on the road, אף על פי שכולם אוכלים מכיכר אחד, even if they are all eating from one loaf, כל אחד ואחד מברך לעצמו. Each and every one make a blessing for himself. ישבו לאכול, if they're not walking, if they sat to eat, אף על פי שכל אחד ואחד אוכל מכרכרו, even each and every one is eating from his own loaf. אחד מברך לכולם. One recites a blessing on behalf of them all, because it's considering a joint meal. So what you said here? קטן ישבו אף על פי שלא יסבו. It was told that they sat and eat even though they did not recline. So what do you have? What do you understand here? That sitting together is enough to render it to a joint meal, right? And you don't require to recline. אמר רב נחמן בר יצחק כגון דאמרי נייזיל ונייחו לחמה בדוך פלן. Rab Nachman Bar Yitzchak said, with regard to those walking along the road, it was in case where they said, let us go to eat in such and such place, right? You go someplace and said, oh, okay, let's go and eat from there. Kinach nafshei derav. Rashi, by the way, said, בדח פלן במקום פלוני. קבעו להם מתחילה מקום בדיבור ועצה והזמנה. They pre-plan, they set a plan what they're going to eat, what they're going to stop, what they're going to have a קביעות, that's considering a permanent. אבל ישבו מלאים במקום אחד יחד, that it's just extemporaneous. They just sit together and not קביעות, it's not permanent. Okay? Now, there is some Geonim that hold that even that it wasn't for bread, if it's just they make it as a seuda, it's already considering a permanent meal. Anyway, kinach nafshe de Rav azlu talmidav batrei. When Rav passed, his student went after his casket to the city where they was to be buried. Ki hadrei, when they returned, amrei, they said, Nezel v'neichu lachma anehar danak. That's the name of river. Let's go and eat bread on the bank of that's Danak river. Batar decharchei yatve v'kami barler. They ate. He said they ate, and they have now a serious predicament. What's the dilemma? Hesebu dav katnan. אבל ישבו לו, או דילמה כיוון דאמרי נייזל ונייחול ריפתא בדוכתא פלניתא, כי יסבו דמי. So they ask a question, what did we learn earlier in the Mishnah? That specifically if they recline, so it's considered a joint meal. But however, if they just sat together, it's not considered a joint meal. Or you tell me the opposite way. Since they said, let us go in such and such place, so it's considered that that's like they recline, and it was not written their capability to resolve the dilemma. So they have an issue here. Kam Rav Ada Barava ahadar kare la'achorei. So Rav Ada Barava stood, and he reversed his cloth, so that his tear, which he has ran from the morning of Rav, was behind him. Ukara kriya rachrina. And he rent his another tear, and when he tore his garment, he lost his teacher, his Rebbe, right? Amar, he said, Nach nafshe de Rav uberkat mezon ala gamrina. He says, Rav is dead, and we have not yet learned the halachot of the grace after meal. So he was like broken-hearted. Adeata usava, until some elderly person came, and Remalau matnitina batraita veshanlu. That great scholar, elderly scholars, he raised a contradiction from Mishnah to the Braita. What did he tell them? Kevan de amri nezil v'neichu lachma beduch plan keisebu dami. He said that since they said let us go to such and such place, it's considered as they recline. So now. So we're going to have some practical halachot. I want to comment on that. Rav Soloveitchik, in his book Halachic Man, have a very big talk about practical halacha, because it's a two school of thought when we study. There is a school of thought that you study lishma, you study not always to get the practical halacha, but just study for the sake of study. You study sugiyot like Ben Sorer, like Egla Rufal, all kind of sugiyot that it looks like is no practical halacha, but that's the beauty of study, and that's the importance of study, lishma, for the sake of study. There is another school of halachot that you have to find always a practical halachot to relate to that. So today, Baruch Hashem, in the daf, we see that there is a lot of practical halachot, but the goal of study, it's not always to have a practical halachot. If we have practical halachot, we share, but we have the combination of both. So here are some practical halachot. First halacha we learn, it's basically Rambam in Chod Berachot. In chapter 3, Rambam said, Kol she'achirim kovim alav su'uda. The whole concept of kviyat su'uda we learned, that if one ate baked items other than bread, but it's made out of 5 species of grain like wheat, barley, spelt, oat, rye. So in an amount of which a regularly is the base meal, So you have to make the grace after meal, the abridge, to recite grace after meal. So that's the opinion of Rav Nachman. So basically, let's say in a practical way, if you ate 2 slices of cake, right, or 1 slice of cake and 2 cookies, right, so you basically need to make after that a bracha mein shalosh ala michya. It's a bridge of Birkat Hamazon. Another important halacha, it's we learn the pat haba'a bekisanim. This is the Shulchan Aruch, Harav deal with that, and also you see it in the Shulchan Aruch Or HaChaim 186. So he said over the bread that comes as a dessert, one does not recite hamotzi, right? That's the way that Rav Mona said. But there is a big question how far you go with that, because some rabbis say that if you just eat like 1 slice of cake and 2 slices of cookies, so then it's ala michya, etc. But let's say if you eat a small roll and then you have some cake and it's turned to be like a meal, even a small meal, then it's become complicated. And some rabbis hold the best case scenario, like Shulchan Aruch Harav, that it's better to go and wash your hand and make a motzi. For example, over a type of pastries made from the watery dough, even it was not mixed with honey or the like, so you have to make a bracha, alright, she'akol. But again, the best case scenario, as we said, if you're planning to have it as a meal, you should wash your hands. Another halacha, we said that teichef, the immediate. So he said teichef lesmicha shchita. One must juxtapose the slaughter of a sacrifice to the laying of the hand upon the head, which is possible. That's in that time. But also we learn that one may not interrupt between the blessing, between Gaal Israel and the Amidah, or one is wash his hand for the final water, may not eat until you have the grace after meal. So if you do the small washing hands before the Birkat Hamazon, you shouldn't eat after that. So trace a scenario, it's the very end of the meal and they give you the water for Birkat Hamazon and suddenly they serve you a cake or something. So you shouldn't eat it because you already intend to do Birkat Hamazon. Now also, if you recite a blessing over the wine before the meal, so you exempt from the wine after the meal from the blessing. Shulchan Aruch on 174. Also, if you have the blessing over the bread, exempt all the appetizer, whose blessing was she'akol. However, the blessing of those appetizer does not exempt the bread, as we said in the Mishnah. Another important halacha, it's if you have a wine during the meal. In other words, over the wine during the meal, each and every individual recite the blessing for himself, and after the meal one recite the blessing on behalf of everyone else. That's a Shulchan Aruch Or HaChaim 174. Nowadays, as we said, it's a customary to continue eating until the grace after meal, and the blessing of wine during the meal exempt the wine that you eat after the meal. Now, the halachot of Maaseh Kdera meaning a cooked dish. If you have the cooked dish, the blessing over the appetizer, which is the general she'akol, it's exempt cooked grain dishes. And the blessing over cooked grain dishes exempt those appetizers. This is how the Rambam resolved the issue here in the Gemarah. Also, we said at the end here that Neizil v'neichu lachman beduch plan. So they said, these students, let us go and eat in such and such place. So designating a particular place to eat together, it's considered as establishing a communal meal. Even in those days they used to have a reclining, but even without reclining, and basically it's already a meal. Now it's a note, you see that this student, he turned his garment. So the whole idea is that just as one rends his garment at the death of a 7 immediate family, like close relatives, one rent his garment over the death of his Rebbe, his teacher. The tear is made in the front of the garments where it's visible. So here they say that the Rav students rent their garments at Rav's funeral. However, to express the added sense of mourning, Rav Ada reverse his garment and rent his garment in a different place. So it's just as an expression. But the whole idea we should remember always, the idea of kviat seuda, if we make it as a meal. The minute you make something as a meal, it's already a meal. So remember, when we have this program tonight with all these pizza and things, don't take a very small slice, because then you enter the domain of problem. Take a slice that you can wash the amotzi and you can say a blessing after a meal.